It's good to have everybody back. April 9th through April 15th, 2020. This is another CIRF report. I'm Chris McCleary. Well, we've got quite a bit going on, and we've got Good Friday coming up, Easter Sunday, but man, in the astrology, there's some opportunities. That's the nice side. The downside is we're going to see some squares to the sun. So let's get started with the summary slide. There's a lot of complexity here, a lot happening, but I'm probably going to be forgetting some stuff, some essential stuff that I wanted to talk about. But nonetheless, the influence is pretty straightforward, and the solution is also pretty straightforward. So towards the end of this report, that's where we talk about how to behave, how to capture the energy that's available to us by acting appropriately in accordance with what the main influences are. We get the influence by this slide here. The purple represents the astrology. The dreambot is the collective unconscious, where we look at all the dreams, and I'll show you the latest dreambot run, which shows you what the words are that people are using in their dreams. And we want this because we want to know where the collective mind is. Not every chart looks like this. The blue is the I-Ching, and it's hexagram 4, youthful folly. There are no change lines. So that means, according to the I-Ching, the influence is the solution. It's one and the same. But what I was going to say is that these charts don't always look this perfect. This is another great overlap. And what I've seen is, as the pandemic has started, these big emotional events have started, the I-Ching reading, the CIRF report in general, in the past, 3 or 4 weeks, has been spot on to the alternative view of what's happening. In other words, is the virus real or not? It doesn't really matter. That's kind of like a sideshow. There's something really going on the underside, and these runs seem to be picking up on that. So that's why I find that really interesting. Now, Trump said that, I don't want to get political here, but he did say something to the effect that in the next 2 weeks is going to be really hard, and that was just a few days ago. I'm going to show you exactly why that is in terms of astrology. It's there, it's indicated, and it has to do with these sun squares. There's 4 of those coming up in the next 2 weeks. We're going to get started on ego obstacles, ego conflict. It's trying to understand the confusing nature of our ego. That's a sun with squares to many different things. We have Mercury going into Aries. That's going to bring some complexity to our thoughts, or at least some changes. How about that? And then Mercury's got some sextiles. So there's a lot of opportunities in the mind. So we're thinking summary, ego and mind. And putting those together, we have ego confusion and defensiveness as the influence. Expect to be feeling like you're maybe lost, or maybe we'll probably be using this term later, dark night of the soul. All right, we're going to start by talking about the dreambot run, and we're going to do that next. All right, here is the dreambot run. Let's zoom in and get started. We're going to keep this summary slide in the lower right-hand part, so you can, refer to that as we go. Here's the collection of dreams. The main meme here is dark night of the soul. It's dark. There's suffering. It's rough. There's heartache. Look at these linguistic sets. I have 2 of them. Number 1, cross, feel, universe, world. Now, cross could be 2 different things. I've heard it said, I haven't verified this, but I've heard it said that some of the Jews are expecting the Messiah to be here already on the planet. That could be kind of indicated here. Christians are waiting for the second coming. Is that the cross? But maybe the universe and the world feels like it's at a crossroads. So there's multiple meanings there. But I thought that linguistics is extremely important. And then number 2, shred, do, change, fear. we're shredding something due to fear of change. Okay. That's the way I picked that up. And then the second meme here is in the blue, and that's your identity. That's like the ego. That's the sun. It's coming right through. Probably should have reversed the colors. The sun probably should be red since it is in Aries. And then the suffering maybe should have been in blue, but whatever. Suffering is in red. Never mind. All right. Let's talk about the astrology here. All right, now a little bit about this chart. I have reduced the orbs in here so these become a little bit less lengthy. These there represent only 2 degrees of orb, which means it's pretty tight. So these things technically are a little bit longer, as we've seen before, but I wanted to focus more on when it goes perfect, like a perfection of that alignment. So anyway, let's look at this. We have Mercury going into Aries. This brings our thoughts to almost rebelliousness, maybe egotistical. Aries can get a little bit egotistical, but courageous. And so the ability of our minds to be taking a lot of suffering potentially. I'm not saying that there is going to be suffering, but have the capability now in terms of mental aptitude with Aries. There's also downsides to Aries, like impulsiveness and, not being able to carry through projects, but we're not worried about those things right now. And we'll talk about these a little bit more later. We have Mercury with our first sextile coming in early in the week. And that's an opportunity for foundation and discipline in the mind. Because Mercury sextile Saturn is cold, hard discipline and maybe some challenges, etc. But there's opportunity. So the mind can get chiseled. It can develop a nice foundation, maybe a plan, that kind of thing. But then the sun squares start to appear here before midweek. Remember, when we start this week, and the 9th, that'd be tomorrow, Thursday, this is already happening, and especially with an 8-degree orb, it's already started. But what this means is that our ego, that's represented by the sun, our sense of self, is conflicted with this Pluto and Jupiter. Pluto and Jupiter have been together, and they are representing a very potentially positive transformation. Well, ego with a square is conflicted from it. So there's a lot of pressure to carry out a positive transformation, but there doesn't seem to be any way to do it. So we kind of feel lost. The ego is going to start feeling lost in this quote unquote positive transformation. It might feel like, comparing yourself to everyone else kind of a thing. And then later on in the week, you're going to finish it up with Mercury, i.e. mind and communication and learning, has more sextile, has more opportunity with Venus and Mars. And so we'll talk all about that. I'll put this in the last slide of the video so that you can refer to that later. All right, so here we go on the 9th. As I mentioned before, you can see the sun starts its 2 squares, and they're already happening because the sun's at 20 degrees and Pluto and Jupiter at 24 and 25 degrees. And so, we've already seen a bit of this square already. Now, so what does that mean? It means that we're, especially sun in Aries, our identity is, maybe defensive. It might be kind of gets hot pretty easy. Impulsive can come to mind, and, kind of getting very egotistical, especially as we can't find that positive, expansive, deep wisdom kind of drive to a new Pluto, the Pluto death rebirth kind of thing. So that's all conflicted. In the meantime, you've got emotions that is trine over to Neptune. And so emotions can get really lost in fantasy. The fantasy is the Neptune in Pisces. And so it's very dreamy. Illusions are everywhere in terms of emotions. And emotions can really drive us away from the now moment. It might be showing us the incorrect emotions. But this sign here is all too easy for escapism to take place. So maybe Sun, ego, gets really frustrated at the obstacles that are being created and decides to just emotionally escape. Okay, so we'll be watching that. On Friday, now, in terms of astrology, let's talk about Good Friday and Easter. Is that an astrological event? Well, not really, but it's based on astrology. So it's the spring equinox. We have the first full moon after the spring equinox, and then the next Friday after that is Good Friday, and the next Sunday after that full moon, that first full moon, is Easter. All right. So we have Good Friday. Now, what's interesting is ego is getting more conflicted. It's worried about change. It's worried about that maybe it didn't have the foundation it did before. Maybe like, who am I? Those kind of questions. Now, keep in mind, the Pope. Now, I'm not big into world news and all that, but I find that really interesting how the Pope drops his title of Vicar of Christ. Apparently that's like a title of representing Christ here on earth. And now apparently he's just going by his regular name. That's an ego change. That's an ego loss. It is direct. Now, of course, it's already happened, but the influence was already there because the Sun and square have already been there. So that was happening at the very beginning of the Sun square Jupiter and Pluto. Okay, so big changes of identity, and that includes pretty much everybody, especially some of the most powerful in the world. Saturday, the 11th. Boy, there's a lot going on here. The first one, most obvious, most important, is Mercury going into Aries. And at this time, mind is coming out of this washy, dreamy space. And I don't know about you and your area, but it was just seemed like it was always cloudy and rainy during this time. But also inside very cloudy and rainy in mind and mental and lethargic. Well, now we get out of that, and there's kind of a two-sided coin here, or a two-sided blade or a sword, is Mercury. So now he's able to really think clearly and fast and communicate, but it might become too much too fast. And we might end up being very impulsive over it. And remember, now we've got both Mercury and the Sun in Aries. And so things are very egotistical. Things are very passionate, impulsive, aggressive, that kind of thing. Very potentially vigorous. We can maybe feel like we're braver or more aggressive than normal. And, having that energy by itself is interesting. But when we're all cooped up in our houses, that could be exponentially more feeling like you're claustrophobic and just want to go boxing or go swimming forever or something very energetic. So that's the mind. And interestingly, at the same time, we've got a sextile with Mercury developing with Mars and Saturn. Mars and Saturn happen to be in Aquarius. And so we have thoughts about or communicate about this opportunity to do something, that's Mars, that we should be doing, that's Saturn, towards a collective goodwill, Aquarius. And so thinking about those opportunities are very profound because it's an opportunity. That's the sextile. There's an opportunity to have thoughts and communicate to others about doing something that we should be doing for the betterment of society. Now, this just sounds like this underground operation that's happening underneath the COVID-19 pandemic, in my opinion. All right, next. Happy Easter, everybody. This is Sunday the 12th. Ego is getting more separated. You see more lines here. And so we've added Saturn now to this list of squares. And so ego is getting even more separated from your inner power, the positive transformation, and the way things should be, the ego that I should have. Okay. And then we also have the moon is conjunct with the south node. Now, what does that mean? Emotionally, we're going to be drummed up with past goo, past emotional experiences. We may have to relive that. There's a square over to Chiron, so it's kind of not really healing, but we're going to get insights. Easy energy to Uranus. Uranus is not just about change, but it's also about quick insights. And so look at your emotional body, your solar plexus, and see if there's any quick insights on Easter. About what? Well, Sagittarius is about deep inner wisdom. It's about deep philosophy, maybe long distance travel, but we can forget about that right now. So deep inner journeys is where the moon is at that time on Easter Sunday. So be looking for quick insights, fast, magical, sudden, drastic, bombastic insights. All right, Monday, we just have even a more closening effect here. Sun's at 24 degrees of Aries, and you have Pluto and Jupiter. So this is a perfect square that we've talked about before. So in terms of being the most separated from a positive transformation or a sense of a positive transformation or deep insight from Jupiter is really troubling and frustrating to us, because more than ever now, ego feels more lost. Now we've got the moon into the mix, and so now there's 4 squares with the sun, and that's pretty much the only thing happening. This I haven't mentioned anything with Venus, because these trines are pretty much dried up, and so we're not focusing too much on that. But moon is conjunct Pluto, because this is an exact conjunction right here, and so these are transformational emotions. We've got a lot of opportunities with emotions over Sunday and Monday in particular, because they're going to show us a lot of insights about how to change. Even though we can't really translate that into ego, it's going to be helpful. Okay. Wednesday. This is where we have the most ego difficulty. Basically, the ego challenges start from scratch. And it's no coincidence, I think, that Trump advertises that we're going to have 2 weeks of hardship. Astrologically, this has everything to do with the sun squares, and then it just keeps getting more and more conflicted throughout the week, all the way to Wednesday. But what we notice here is a sextile with Mercury and Saturn, and then Mercury and Venus. And so there's a lot happening here. So one of the opportunities is thoughts about what we should be doing. I already mentioned that before, but the emphasis here is now on the moon and Saturn, because those two are conjunct now. And so that opportunity is more like listening to mom now. If you got, kind of hearing your mom's voice in the background telling you should be doing this, you should be doing this, that could be a very big opportunity for you, is, almost pretending or maybe intentioning to have a dream about mom, or just if she's still alive, go call her and have a chat with mom. Mom is being represented by the moon in your emotional body, and the hardcore disciplined Saturn is kind of softened with that. And so there's an opportunity there. Mercury sextile Venus is thoughts about, opportunity to have thoughts about how to, harmonize and see more beautiful or more beauty around you, ultimately being more grateful, ultimately being more embedded and experiencing this reality rather than fighting against it. All right, folks, that is it on the astrology. Now it's time for the solution. We normally finish the I-Ching part of the influence, but here you see that the influence is the same thing as the solution. So it's time to listen to our sponsor, Interzension. We'll be back shortly to talk about the solution. All right, well, here we are with the solution, and we have Mountain Over Water, hexagram 4, it's youthful folly. There's nothing new here. I already talked about it in the summary slide, but most of the information I'm going to read to you is the solution. In other words, it's telling you how to behave. So I'm going to read from this chart here for hexagram 4. Be on guard for the careless and rebellious attitudes characteristic of inexperience. What does this sound like? The carelessness and rebelliousness sounds like Mercury and Sun in Aries. It's a good time to focus on learning lessons. That is also Mercury. It's a good, because Mercury is learning. It's a good time to focus on learning lessons from a patient teacher or from a life experience. I believe that's our connection to the dreambot. The dreambot, the collective unconscious, is saying that we might be going through some sort of dark night of the soul. This is the time to start learning and focusing on assimilating new experiences. All right, let me keep reading on. Be respectful of anything or anyone who has something to teach you right now. Be respectful of your new Mercury, who's starting a new cycle in Aries. Develop the necessary mindset and willpower to carry you through confusing times. Oh my God. Do I need to read that again? Develop the necessary mindset and willpower. Mindset is Mercury. Willpower is ego. Sun. Develop the necessary Mercury and the necessary Sun to carry you through confusing times. So we've got it embedded in the stars. We just need to be able to behave appropriately to maximize this energy. Examine your attitude and factors that would limit your openness. Observe how you deal with the mistakes of others. Let people live their own lives and learn their own lessons. You may offer them your wisdom or advice, but do so if they are receptive. Give up trying to convince others that you are right, as it is both exhausting and counterproductive. Instead, allow others to proceed, even into difficult or dangerous circumstances. It may be the only way they can learn, and without learning, no one can achieve success. All right, as I proceed on, how knowing something with inner certainty means nothing needs to be defended. In other words, truth doesn't need to be defended. It just is. And if you're finding yourself very defensive, i.e. the influence of Mercury and Sun in Aries and the squares from the Sun, then that means that you're not really confident in that truth. When we are enlightened, we need no words or confirmation of our truth. Teachers come into our lives in many forms. Be open to how this may be happening. In other words, this is a time of great learning, probably the biggest learning that we've ever had as a collective. One who sees failure as a stepping stone for success always succeeds. Remember, just as a side here, what's going to make you feel failure? Maybe those obstacles, those squares that we talked about, but also the Pluto influence. Pluto loves to make you feel like you're failing. Also a little bit of hard, cold, disciplined Saturn. Do not hide your weakness. It can only be transformed into strength by exercising it. The journey is a process of discovery. The idea of a destination can be a trap, and the fear of failure can keep you from being the best you can be. You may need to give something time in order for the answer to become clear. Maybe you are operating on assumptions and are not open. We're going to talk about that in our summary slide. Check your assumptions if you can't assimilate the new information. Perhaps the question needs to be tweaked a little before the answer is given. With no changing lines, perseverance in a changed approach to your questioning is in order. All right, continued our solution. Now we get into the other astrology. This is Sidereal. And I propose to you, this is when Mercury is going into Aries, and Sun, of course, is already in Aries, but we project out into the sidereal for our solution, and that happens to be Pisces. We're going to talk all about this in our summary slide, so just hold that thought for now. But I want to show you where Mercury is. We take this little line here, because this placement of these symbols aren't exactly where they should be in terms of the exact placement. You have to look at these little hairlines, and it shows you that you're right in the beginning of Aries, obviously. And that, so that in terms of the Rave mandala, that is hexagram 25. And I just have a picture of hexagram 25. So what does that mean? It's the gate of the spirit of the self. We're back to the ego again. We're back to, now this was where Mercury was, but the Sun is the ego. The innocence is tested in the fire of competitive energy. This, to me, sounds a lot like the collective unconscious. So it's saying that despite the outward appearances, the true competition is whether the self can maintain its innocence despite the circumstances. This is the gate of a spiritual warrior. Ooh, what does that sound like? It sounds like Pisces. This is the gate of the spiritual warrior, the shaman, the priestess. It is the potential to love existence without discrimination. In other words, if you're truly in love, then you're not going to be fighting the dark night of the soul if that comes. You're not going to be fighting the hard times as they roll in. They're going to be learning experiences. See how this is all weaved together? All right, now we are ready for the summary slide. All right, up top we have the black area. This is the yin part of the chart, the influence. This is the influence summary. We talked about all the astrology. The picture here is of kind of two figurines, not figuring out which one I am, or that's kind of the ego getting confused. It's ego confusion. So here's our list of the best solution from the different perspectives. In Sidereal, remember it's Pisces. In the Rave mandala, it's 25. So the Rave, according to the Rave, maintain self, maintain your sense of self through the wounding and scars, even through the wounding. So not saying that you have to go through the wounding to maintain self, but make sure you are maintaining self and that concept, even as you're going through your suffering. Don't lose yourself in this, all right? Sidereal, from the Pisces perspective, that solution says, dude and dudettes, you've got to detach from the material side of things if need be. The best sign in the zodiac for detaching from this physical reality is Pisces. They are not influenced by money and material objects. They're more spiritual in nature. They have transcendent awareness. This is coming up from kind of top, not or coming up from above, not to dismiss yourself from the suffering, but to be able to see the big picture in the suffering, including yourself. But also from the Pisces perspective is that we're connected to all. We're all in this. And they have a really gift of having more awareness as well on multiple levels. In the I-Ching, hexagram 4 says, on guard for carelessness and rebelliousness and those attitudes. So humble thyself and notice your ego wants. Notice your ego wants so that you can gain a higher understanding of, so you can not lose yourself. but you don't have to necessarily go towards that and go get them. All right, so here's the biggest one in terms of Mercury and Aries is learning. Mercury is all about learning. Their teachings are everywhere. Soak them all up. Watch for defensiveness, and you can start seeing resistance in your own body of these learning opportunities. And when you do that, we start playing the blame game. When we start to suffer, we start to blame. And so watch for shooting the messenger. I think we're all in a big struggle for finding what's really going on out there. And we're hoping for the best. We're hoping for the best outcomes. I think in this week, it's about not doing any of that. You know, I'm not asking you to lose hope, but can we take a break from hope for a second this week and just see as much as, learn as much as you can learn, soak up as much as you can soak up. Watch your defensiveness of new learning experiences, i.e. suffering points. Don't shoot the messenger. In other words, don't start blaming, pointing your finger and projecting yourself on everybody else. I find myself doing that with certain elites. I almost said the name, but I don't know if that's even worth mentioning. Somebody who wants me to prove that I've got a certain vaccinations made, and that one I am very defensive on. Become a student of life, though, in this week. During any contradiction, so notice how when you're trying to assimilate something new into your mental aptitude, and you're trying to, you've heard something very different, sometimes it's hard to just push it into the psyche and call it truth. And that's a good thing. But in that contradiction, we tend to, because of cognitive dissonance, some of us just go, that's too much. I'm going to shove that over here, and I'm only going to pick what I've already known. That's not this time to do that. Now is the time to be able to offer up, multiple ideas. Where are my hands? 2 ideas at the same time, maybe even contradictory, and have both of them in your logical brain at the same time, holding them loosely, not holding too tight to one dogmatic view or another. Pause assimilation. What I mean by that is let these ideas just float, and the truth will sift out, but it's about learning potentials, learning new ideas, so you can do kind of like what we're doing with I guess it'd be down below, the summary slide and the triangulation of all these circles. You can do that with ideas that different people have, and maybe different explanations about what's happening. Triangulate those, and if there's like an overlap in the middle, maybe the truth is right there. But hold that even loosely. All right, so ultimately, I have this bottom orange red area. It says the gist of the solution is it's all about ego learning and assimilation. It's not about defending your ego and keeping yourself intact. It's letting that ego go for a while, knowing that deep down inside, he or she's not changing. That ego is going to be there. It just might feel, well, first of all, it might feel like there's some suffering, but it also might feel weird how you're losing yourself in this new material, new assimilation of information. And so it requires you to honor the Aries Mercury, which is mental agility and mental openness. All right. And with that, I will leave you to this last slide, which is just the summary slide of the major aspects that are happening. With that, intervention.com is where you can get psychotherapy, you can get coaching, you can get an astrology reading. By the way, insurance companies, check your insurance company. Some of them are paying for free, completely free, deductibles paid, no co-pays, temporarily for teletherapy until some of them, well, they vary, but like May 5th, for example. So if you're one of those that gets free therapy, give Intervention a call and get started today. All right. With that, can't wait to see everybody's comments. Have a good one. Thanks for being here and good luck this week. I believe in you.